Excellent. As Kelsey was saying, I'm Erica Peplinsky-Bird. You can just call me Erica. We are a small group, as elementary groups usually are. Please feel free to type in the chat or just speak up if you have questions, whatever you're comfortable with. And I was in the classroom for 18 years. I've been teaching since 2005, every grade from pre-K to eighth grade. Just so you know that I have lots of classroom experience. So we're going to explore our two elementary programs, Primaria 1 and Primaria 2. They are full of good things for all age levels. And yes, I have heard of older teachers using a lot of these materials too, or teachers of older students. So they are for everyone. Can I ask, are both of you teaching Spanish? Or is everyone teaching Spanish? I'll still probably say things in English too for the sake of the recording, but if you could let me know what language you teach in the chat, that would be helpful for me. Got one Spanish, K through sixth grade, the fun age range. Okay, we're going to keep on going. Español, perfecto. All right, that will make it a little bit easier, but I will still translate to English just because of the recording. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about who this series was made for. We're going to talk about the organization of a typical unit and key resources, some of my favorite ways to use those resources, and then some tips on pacing the curriculum. So this Primaria was really built. I helped design the K through 12 Spanish program for the district I was working for. And this Primaria is really built for the foundation of our Spanish programs. Primaria 1 is built with students in K through second grade involved. For K through second grade, for novice level students, and you can see the picture of this adorable bat right here, Marcel el Murciélago. So most of our stories in Primaria 1 focus on animals in different Spanish speaking countries because that's very accessible to kids and most children love animals. And then the lower picture you see is from Primaria 2. It's intended for students from third to fifth grade, novice level students, but it can be used with older students. Primaria 2 follows the same group of kids, all from different Spanish speaking countries, and some of them are friends, and they are present in all of the stories, so you kind of get to know them. And then my favorite part is the very last story. They meet in Chile at a music festival, and they kind of all become friends. So it's kind of fun because you get to know the kids and their personalities throughout the series. So, Primaria is built the way our brains naturally acquire language. If you think of a baby learning their first language, they get something like 10,000 hours of input before they start to output at around 1 year of age. Luckily, we have a common language with our students, so we don't need 10,000 hours of input to be able to start to output. So, we can use our L1, our language one shortcut. However, we still build our language, whether it's the second or third or fourth language, the same way in our brains. And our programs are structured around how our brains naturally acquire languages. We start with individual words and phrases. Then we build to sentences and brief interactions. And actually, this sentences and brief interactions is where most of our communication takes place in our day to day interactions. And then we go to paragraph and short text, and finally to longer text and discourse. And that's the way that our program is built. That's kind of the way our brain naturally acquires. And all throughout, we weave culture, and there's chances for input and output interaction with our students. So we're going to dive right in. This is a page from Primaria 1. It is one of our vocabulary pages. All of the vocabulary pages have native speaker audio that students, this is just a screenshot, but if we were in the program, you could click on those to hear the native speaker audio. This is our drop-down directory book. The introduction to the unit, which I didn't show you, just has kind of like a teacher note and a student note to kind of let you know what's coming up. And then we are broken down into stories, and we start with the vocabulary. And this is our vocabulary page, and you will see that there are some total physical response gestures. And total physical response is just when you tie a gesture to a word. It also in your brain will tie the meaning of that word to the movement, and it helps our brains to start to comprehend the language more easily. And so if you see like the bottom one down here is se pone, which is pretend to put on socks. So if you put on se pone, pretend to put on socks, and do the gesture, it's going to tie the meaning to the gesture in your head. That one's kind of hard to see on the screen right now, but if we're doing they, which as you see on the screen is point your index and middle fingers to your eyes and then outwards as if saying, I'm watching you. So if you do they, that ties this meaning to the gesture. So if you were saying they and your student couldn't quite remember what the word was, and then you do this, a lot of the times that will be enough for them to be like, oh, I know that word. So learning these words, these TPR words that students can act out, is very helpful for increasing language acquisition. What I would recommend doing, and there are a lot of words on this page because it's the colors, but with these words down here, like se pone, ve, and los lentes, is you introduce those, you practice the gestures with your students, you do some kind of silly movements, like you might say ve, have students do ve, and then you might have them do los lentes, which is running your finger over the bridge of your nose, and then ve again and then los lentes, ve, and just go back and forth between them. Or even with my elementary students or older students, you could play a game of Simon Says once you've taught these. So I would teach these, and maybe a couple other words, so maybe around 6 words for a game of Simon Says, and then play Simon Says with the students. Simon dice ve. Simon dice los lentes. They. Oh, I didn't say Simone dice. I didn't say Simon says, so you're out. That's a really fun way to get these in and to make it kind of a game that you can play with TPR. You can have students lead the game after a little bit, but it's a great way to get these words in a really natural way. That's fun for students. From here, you will see after you've introduced this vocabulary, we start with the empezamos sections. Empezamos sections are movement activities or generally non-screen based activities that get the students up and moving. These are all activities I've done with my students that I absolutely love. What you could do is introduce these words and then play some of these games and make it just a single lesson and make that an entire lesson. And then as you progress throughout the unit, so you've introduced the words and the vocabulary, you're going to do these empezamos activities, but then as you progress throughout the unit, go back to these empezamos activities. Like after empezamos, we're going to read the story, start that class with some of these activities. And then before you do some of the post-story activities, come back to these games and these activities. Play them throughout the unit because it's lots of free repetitions. It gets kids up and moving. It helps them get the words in their bodies and get the wiggles out before you have them do something that's higher concentration. So we do put these at the beginning of the story, but I recommend spending a day playing with them and then sprinkling them back throughout the units so that students get all of the repetitions they can from these. They generally really like doing them too. For this unit, which is our colors unit, we have 3 empezamos activities. I am going to tell you these, mainly because these are activities you could also use throughout basically teaching anything in Spanish. One is ¿Dónde están los personajes?, which is where are the characters? If you were to click on this empezamos link right here, these activities would drop down, and ¿Dónde están los personajes?, would come up with a bunch of coloring pages for students. These are different animals that have been introduced throughout Primaria, so the students will know the animals because we're in Unit 4 at this point. And I would let students each pick their favorite animal to color, and then they color it. And then this is one of my absolute favorite activities to do with students. I just take their pictures, tape them up around the room, and then I'll ask where they're at, where they are. So I might say, ¿Dónde está el ajolote azul? Where is the blue axolotl? And the kids have to run around the room and find a blue axolotl. And my kids know they can't jump up and rip the pages off the wall. They have to point at them and say aquí, which means here. And then you move on. ¿Dónde está el ajolote rojo? Where is the red axolotl? Or whatever colors your students have drawn the animals. And they just run around the room looking for these animals. Now this is super, super fun for the kids because they love finding their own pictures and running around the room finding them. They're up and moving, super low prep for you because all you have to do is print these out and then let the students color them, which also gives you a break from being kind of the center of attention. And after you've played the game with these, what you could do is have students actually write the color that their animal is and just have them write that one word on this line and then put them into a binder and have that be a free voluntary read students could go and look through. And they really, really like looking at each other's pictures and seeing their own pictures. And it's lots of extra repetitions of reading. Even kindergartners and pre-kindergartners, I still have the words around for them to see and to read and to trace and to practice with, because they will. I have found my kindergartners will start to read in Spanish about halfway through the year. So having those words up and using them in frequent movement games like this one is a great way to get lots of movement from your kids, get them up, and to also have them feel centered in the lesson because you're sharing their work. Toca el color. This is, again, a good one to play throughout the year if you need to refresh colors. It's super, super fast. It gets the kids up and moving. All I do is we review the colors, and I just review the colors with, like, just point at them and say them. And a good tip, always say them in the first language as well as the target language, because you will have likely some kids who are colorblind. We want to make sure we're not leaving those kids out. But basically, I review the colors, and then I say toca algo, touch something, and then I say a color. And the kids just have to run around the room and touch. I make sure they know they can only touch with one finger, otherwise they will rip things off the wall, or point at something of that color. Toca algo azul, toca algo rojo, toca algo anaranjado. Touch something red, touch something blue, touch something orange. My kids know that when we're playing this game, they can't speak English, but they can repeat the colors. So what that looks like in my room is I'll say toca algo rojo, touch something red, and then my kids are all running around the room going rojo, rojo, like they're just yelling the word over and over because they're so excited. And then you can go around and comment on a few of the things the kids are touching that are the right color, and then move on to the next color. This is a super fast game, takes about 5 minutes. The kids like to play it. Nobody gets out. They run around the room. They're active and they're practicing colors all at the same time. And last but not least is veo veo, or I spy. The way I play it in my classroom is I say veo veo, and which means I see, I see. My kids say, ¿Qué ves? What do you see? And then I say veo algo. I see something, and then I give the color. And then they have to guess what it is that I'm seeing. Now for this one, sometimes I will just use the classroom, especially if I want to practice classroom vocabulary. But other times I will take a really beautiful picture, and Primaria has panoramas and other pictures you can use, and I will show you those a little bit later. And I will use that to play Veo Veo, to play I Spy, because that way you can start to talk about the culture and the place you're looking at the same time as you're practicing those colors. So we kind of mix it all together. So these are all the Empezamos activities. And again, I recommend you do the vocabulary, do these activities, but then make sure you come back to the activities as you progress through the stories. They're great to get for getting kids up and moving, and for reinforcing vocabulary, and for just having fun with the students, which is really important. Okay, from the vocabulary and the Empezamos activities, we go into the actual story. Each story is set in a different Spanish-speaking country, and most of them in Primaria 1 focus on animals from around the Spanish-speaking world. We do have the flag for you of the country of focus and then an outline of the country. If I were you, I would recommend having the map of the country and then having the map of wherever you're at, and then looking at them and talking about them. What's the same about where you live, and what's different about where you live? For example, I'm in Michigan, so I might say with Puerto Rico, we are surrounded in Michigan by water on 3 sides, but Puerto Rico is surrounded by water on 4 sides. Compare and contrast and talk about what's the same and different. I love, one of my favorite things as a language teacher is giving the kids this speech of like, we live at this place in Michigan, and this place in Michigan is a great place to live for X, Y, and Z reasons. However, the world is a big and beautiful and exciting place, and we get to explore the world in this classroom, because that's what we're doing, is we're connecting our students to the world. So these story openers are a great opportunity to look at the flag, compare it to our flag, look at the map, compare it to where you live, and then really get the students kind of world focused, which is what I like to do in my classrooms. From there, we have the story. This is one of my favorite stories. It is about an adorable bat named Marcel, and Marcel is colorblind. But he has these magical glasses, and when he puts them on, he can see colors, and he's looking for certain fruit. So There are lots of ways you could tell the story, and I would recommend telling the story more than once. For example, in this one, I would say, Marcel es un murciélago. And I would make these little bat noises because, kids like the bat noises. And I would have the kids guess, what do you think un murciélago is? And I would go like this, because my students know when I do this, they can call out so they don't feel like it's a risk to call it out. And they would tell me that he's a bat. And I would definitely at this point have a student chosen that could make the bat noises anytime I say murciélago, which will help connect, and I will have my students do this for bat, and that will help connect the sound and the movement to the actual word. And then I would just go through and tell the story. Normalmente, Marcel no ve colores. And those are some of those TPRs. With my young students, like kindergarten and pre-kindergarten, I will even do some double talk where I would say something like normalmente, normally, Marcel no ve, doesn't see colores. I want to make sure, especially at the beginning, that I'm padding it and keeping every student with me. That will make it a lot easier to go faster later if you go slow at the start and make sure they're all on the same page. I also have my students do sound effects. So for like this third sentence where it says Marcel tiene lentes mágicos, Marcel has magical glasses. I would go like this. My students will all go, oh, because that is really exciting. But it also adds some extra to the story. Now, in this story, with the magic glasses, Marcel can see colors. So we would go over all of that, and I would go over it a lot slower with my students. But we would proceed throughout the story. And the first time with the story, I would just kind of tell it to them. I would have them add some sound effects, make sure everyone really understands the story. And you can see he puts on his magic glasses and he can find the fruits in Puerto Rico. This one, I didn't have the slides in here, but it's fun because he looks for a certain fruit. And you could have, like, he looks for a fruit that's orange, and you could have students come up and point at the board and help Marcel find the fruit, which would be another fun angle you could take with this story. Now, I would tell the story this way the first time, just going through it slowly, making sure students understand. Then I would do some post-story activities, maybe some of those games, and then the next class, I would come back to the story. During the next class, there's lots of different ways you can do it, but one opportunity for the next class is to redo this story and have a student acting out Marcel and other students acting out the fruits or other characters in the story for other stories. And then I might come back a third time and have all students acting at the same time. So I might say, okay, you're Marcel and you're the fruit Marcel wants, and I'm going to tell the story and everyone acts at the same time. And you can watch, and I learned this strategy from Karen Rowan. It's called All the World's a Stage. You can watch the students acting out the story and see who understands and who needs more help. And it's no extra teacher prep. The story is right there for you. But these are all just different ways you could act out the story. You could also do it with puppets, or by pausing and pointing, or you could even print the story and have students have the stories in their hands as you read them. You can see there's a print story button right here. So there's lots and lots of different things you can do with the story. I would definitely not recommend just reading it and moving on it. I would milk it for all of its language goodness that you can. After that, we have our post-story activities. And for these, the first one is multiple choice, and there is audio, and you say Marcel blank un murciélago. Well, now we're looking for Marcel is a bat. I would have students, especially for your younger students, I would project this on the board and have them come up and tap the answer that they think is correct. And as the teacher, when they're tapping, if you have that technology available, I would click the answer on my keyboard. That's worked for me before when I didn't have a smart board, but I did have a projector, and the kids think that they're actually tapping and making a tap, but it doesn't tap. But I would do these as a class for your younger students, like pre-K or kindergarten. For your slightly older students, I would still do it as a class first, and then I would have them go do it on their own. That way, your students who are fast processors and don't need extra help, they'll fly through it, but they were going to fly through it anyway, and then they can move on to extension activities, of which we have many in Voces, so you don't have to pre-prep them. But your students who are slower processors or are struggling a little bit will do much better if you do it as a class first, and they have that reinforcement. And then they're just going to get some extra reading, so you're kind of scaffolding without extra work for the teacher. We also have this one, which is sequencia, or putting the story in order. Again, you can do it as a class and have them move these up and down in the correct order. Or you could even print these and have students do this, like cut it out, like they do traditionally in their younger classes anyway. Like they'll do that in kindergarten and first grade when they're learning to read sequence of story. You can do that in here by printing these out and have students cut them out and put them in the right order. Or you can do it all as a class. You could even have students act out each of these sentences and then decide what the order is. There's lots of opportunities to use this as more than just a quick go and do this on your computer. It can be a whole group thing that you all do together. And last but not least, we always have a drawing activity in every chapter. Kids love to draw. And it's nice for you because then you don't have to be the center of attention for a minute. And here it says Marcel can see colors with his glasses. Draw the fruits he sees with the correct colors. So you could have students draw this and you could just do the prompt that's there. But you could also tell students, add your favorite fruit, or add a friend for Marcel, or add an extra detail. And then you could take these coloring pictures or the pictures the students use and put them up, and you could actually talk about them while students are sorry, you could actually talk about the finished projects, like, oh, look, Marcel has, and talk about the fruit he has, and then talk about the fruit the student had. And Marcel has watermelon. Do you like watermelon? Who likes watermelon? So these pictures can become more than just like a quick drawing. They can become a whole conversation piece. You could put them around the room and have students hunt for them, like in the ¿Dónde está? Where is the person activity that I gave you at first? Or again, you could put them in a binder and let students go through it and see all the pictures. None of these are wrong. All of these are great ways to use this activity. Students can take a picture so you can have your own, recording of the picture. You can even send these home and tell students to tell their parents about them and to use as much Spanish as they can, which is great PR for you. And in this chapter, we have a Cuéntame. It's an extension activity. This is not going to be for all students, but for your students who are fast processors or native speakers, Cuéntame is they are just retelling the story. This is a great kind of like moving portfolio you can keep for students from a young age. It's great for them to be able to retell the story, and that lets you know really where they're at. And it makes students feel very, very confident when they're retelling the story. So this is great for your faster processors or your heritage speakers. I definitely have had some kindergartners who have taken to the language so quickly that they would be able to do this even if they just started in the fall. So those are, that is kind of our little walkthrough of Primaria 1. We're going to do a very similar thing with Primaria 2 now and then talk about some of the extras. But before I move on from Primaria 1, and also selfishly so I can drink a little drink of my coffee, are there any questions you have for Primaria 1? I feel like I'm talking very quickly and throwing a lot out at you, but I'm all very excited and also very caffeinated. Take a few more seconds to see if there's questions that anyone's typing. And if not, we'll move on. Okay, so Primaria 2 is for our slightly older students. You will see again, we have these vocabulary with the audio. Students can listen with you in class. They can listen at home. Oh, I just got a question. I'm going to pause and go to the question, then I'll come back to this. The question is, would you teach the colors first and then do the story activities? And I absolutely would because the colors are throughout the stories. I'm just going to go back so I can show you because we'll just take a second. But I would teach the colors and play those empezamos games. Playing those games for a day or two will do a lot to get the colors stuck in your students' heads so that by the time they get to the story, they're going to know a lot of these words. Because if you think about it, passing is out, talking about the different colors the animals could be, having the students color the pages, hanging them up all over the room. That's going to take a minute. So this whole time when students are coloring these pictures, I'm walking around and saying, oh, you're coloring it blue, or you're coloring it purple, or my favorite color is blue. So you're talking about the colors so much that by the time they get to the story, the colors will feel familiar. During the story too, you can hold up the color that you're talking about or point at it, or again clarify in the first language if you feel the need to, if you feel like your students don't have it. But playing these games for a day or two first and then playing them again right before you tell the story will make the students pretty comfortable with that. Excellent question. All right, back to Primaria 2. And I'm going to get one more drink before we jump in. Okay, this is one of my favorite stories from Primaria 2, though I really love a lot of the stories. And this one, again, same setup you'll see in Primaria 1. We start with the vocabulary. Native speaker audio. Students can listen at home if they have their own accounts or in class with you. And then we go into the empezamos activities. So I would start by introducing the vocabulary, and you might want to only introduce like maybe 7 of the new words and then do some of the empezamos activities, and then the next day practice them and come back and introduce some of the other new words. However, you will see numbers don't need, I would say that numbers don't need quite as much like total physical response practice, because once you've taught the students the numbers, you can integrate them all over the place in class, and so they'll get more natural for students. So I would teach the numbers, but I wouldn't be quite as concerned with total physical response for the numbers. And you'll see that some of these words, if you did Primaria 1, like es and va and I, are words they're going to be familiar with too. So there's really not quite as much new vocabulary as it seems like here. Again, the total physical response, I would practice this with the students, make it a game. You could play Simon Says. You could have one side of the room be Spain and one side be Mexico, and tell Spain to do one action and have Mexico do the other. Like Spain, do mascota, Mexico do contenta. Now Spain do contenta, Mexico do mascota, and have them switch back and forth. But there's lots of different ways you can play with total physical response. In fact, Justin did a session on total physical response during this conference. So if you missed that, there'll be a recording. I recommend you check it out. But total physical response is a great way to introduce the vocabulary, and from there, the empezamos activities. Again, these are great activities to get the students up and moving. I love this one with my students. It's charades. Could not be simpler for teacher prep. You just post the list, the vocabulary list, and then you have students act out one of the things on the list. Now, when I first play, I just tell my students they're going to act out one of these vocabulary words, and if they think they know the word the person is acting out, raise their hand. If they guess correctly, they get to go next, or they get to pick the person that goes next, a volunteer. Because some students want to guess, but they don't want to get up and act silly. Though I find most of my students enjoy acting silly. Some of them are a little bit shyer. So I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable to participate. So for example, you'll see the words in case we have non-Spanish speakers. The first 5 words, I'll start with those are baby, grandpa, dad, mom, uncle, and cousin, and pet. So go ahead and guess which one I'm acting out in the chat, so we at least get a little interaction. Baby, muy bien. Though I was thinking as I was doing this, oh, that could also be mom, because I'm a mom rocking the baby. But I was trying to do baby. So if you guessed mine, like in this case, it was Julie, I would say, Julie, you can go next, or you can pick a volunteer to go next. I will play this game um, till it seems old with my students. So I'll play it, and then as soon as they seem like they're getting like a little bit bored, and it might be the first day or even the second day with just charades this way, I'll tell them they can act out 2 words at once. So they can act out 2 words at the same exact time, and we have to guess the 2 words that they're acting out. This ends up making it really, really silly, and students love it. And then they get to use their words in greater combination. So again, there's baby, grandpa, dad, mom, uncle, and then I'm going to go over here because that would be hard to do these ones. And then there's happy, sad, scared, and mad. And I'm going to do this and tell me which two words I'm acting out. What two words am I acting out? Please, someone guess so I can stop doing it. I'm angry, and I got my hand on my back because my back hurts. Enojado y abuelo. Perfecto. I'm angry, and old would also work. Though I do make sure I tell my students we often will do like hand on the back and a cane for grandpa or grandma, but I tell my students definitely not all grandparents walk that way. That's just so we can act it out. So charades is the first game. You can play this with almost any vocabulary. Students get hilarious with some of the ways they will act out multiple words at once. Highly recommend this game. Super low teacher prep. You can use it with almost any vocabulary. You could make a list like this, or you could just project the vocabulary onto the board and tell them which categories they could be in. Un animal especial. So we actually, this story focuses on chameleons, and the main character brings her pet chameleon to visit her grandparents in Colombia. And so we made like a little mini side book about chameleons so that students would know about them and be familiar with it. And then this comes with an activity. So it just, this, in case you aren't a Spanish speaker, says I live in Africa, Asia, and the south of Europe. And again, you get to point at the map and talk about the colors. We made it colorful on purpose so you can do both in one. I can move my eyes in two different directions. So I would read this, puedo, and I would do double talk with the little ones. Puedo, I can mover, move, mis ojos, and I would ask students to guess what ojos are, and I point at them so most of them would guess. En dos direcciones diferentes, in two different directions. And I would definitely for sure have students try that. They're not chameleons, so they can't, but they would have a fun time trying that, and it might point out, oh, look, you can only move your eyes in one direction. So look, they can move their eyes in two directions. And we would talk about it, and that'd be kind of a fun page to sit on for a minute. And we kind of tried to design these to give you opportunities like that. I move very slow, and I would have the students definitely practice moving slow, but my tongue is fast. And with little kids, they would be moving around like a chameleon and practicing moving slow, but with a fast tongue. And again, they're practicing, they're moving, they're learning some things about the world. And the end of this story, and we didn't look at the whole thing just for time's sake, but at the end of this story, the question is, which chameleon do you want? Now, this is great because you get to practice the question word of which, and do you want, quieres, which is another really, really big one. And then they get to pick one of these four different adorable chameleons. They get to name it, they get to say how it's feeling, and then they get to color it. And so that is their special animal, but you could also totally use that Donde está el personaje? Where is the person? Or where's the character game from Primaria 1? And you could take these and hang them up around the room and have them search for one of the chameleons. You could make up a story about one of these chameleons or have a student do it if you have, advanced learners or native speakers. Or you could put these all in a book, and I highly recommend this one, like a binder, and have students read through it. And you're getting tons of repetitions of these high frequency words like soy un, I am a, me llamo, I call myself, estoy, I am, with slightly different endings for the students. So that's like you're getting a little bit of new information, tying into old information, lots and lots of interesting practice. And I always have my students, they're allowed to add details to the chameleons or like make food or a friend for them. So the students will have interesting pictures to look at, and they love looking at their own work. Very low teacher prep, very high rewards for what you get from this activity. And then finally, the last empezamos activity for this story is Adivina quién, or 20 preguntas, which is guess who, or 20 questions. You could do this one of two ways. I could say, I'm thinking of someone, and you could just guess, or I could give you a clue, like, I'm thinking of someone, and the person, and this would all be in Spanish. Tiene lentes, has glasses. Well, that narrows it down to just being Mepa or Momo. Then I could say es amarillo, is yellow, and then the students will be able to guess es Momo if I want to give clues. But I could also let students ask me questions, like for your more advanced students. Younger students can guess with clues, adivina quién, guess who, but they can ask yes or no questions, or 20 preguntas, they could ask yes or no questions. So you could ask me a question like, do they have glasses? Do they have a hat? Do they have a bow? And I would say yes or no. And then students will eventually guess the right person or the right chameleon here. Now, for students, for words they should know they're learning, like lentes, if they would say tienes, do they have glasses? I would say the word tienes lentes, lentes, and make sure I say it a bunch. But if it's a word that maybe they haven't learned yet, you can say it for them once, but let them finish the question in English, like the word for bow. So you emphasize the words that you think are important for students, and for words that aren't as important, like maybe bow or headband, you can move on more quickly. Do you all want to play a game of 20 questions really quickly so you can see how it works, or should we keep going? And I will wait for someone to tell me in the chat what's preferred. Play. All right, there we go. Okay, so I am thinking of a chameleon, and you may ask me questions about the color of the chameleon, if the chameleon is has certain items, basically any yes or no questions. So someone asked me a question in the chat. On here, I would probably have some stems for my students, like TNA, does he or she have? Are they the color of, just to get students starting. But we can play in English, since I'm not sure that we're all Spanish speakers, but go ahead and ask me a yes or no question to try to guess my chameleon. Oh, it has to be Vanessa. That's a great question. She said, what color is it? If we were playing Guess Who, I would tell you the color, but with 20 questions, it's only yes or no. So you have to guess a color, like say, is it orange? Es azul. Oh, good guess. Me gusta, pero no. No es azul, not blue. Es naranja. Sí, es naranja o anaranjado. My character is orange. Very, very good guess. So my character is not blue. My character is orange. Oh, light orange. My character is a girl. Yes, is a girl. So you would say, is the character girl? I would say, yes, the character is a girl. Do they have a yellow nose? Yes, they have a yellow nose. They are orange. They are a girl. And I would be saying, Es Maria! Fabuloso! Fantástico! Muy bien! Exactly. And you do it like this, and you get lots of repetitions because every time someone's asking me, is it pink? I'm saying, no, it's not pink. No, it's not blue. So you're getting extra repetitions of the important words. And then you can really see what students understand. Like if someone asks, ¿Tiene lentes? And I say, sí, tiene lentes. Yes, they have glasses. And then you have students guessing characters that don't have glasses. You know they didn't understand the glasses word and you need to practice it more. So this is a really fun game. Again, very low teacher prep. And students will get lots and lots of information, and you can play it at different levels based on the students you have in front of you. Um, the stories, and I don't think I pointed this out with Primaria 1, but they all have native speaker audio. So you can play the audio for the students. Like I would totally tell the story the way I showed you with the bat story the first time, but then the second time, maybe you just have them listen to it and they can do the total physical response gestures as they hear it, or they can draw the pictures as they listen to the story. But this is with native speaker audio, and if I was on the platform instead of looking at a screenshot, this little clock speeds up or slows down the audio. So if you have advanced groups that can hear audio at full speed, you could have them go listen to the story on their own. Conversely, if your students need for it to be a little bit slower, you can slow it down too. Anywhere there's a blue word, it's a word we think maybe the students won't know yet. So if you hover over it in the textbook, not on the screenshot I have here, it will pop up the English meaning. So that's there for you too. So again, I would tell this story the same way I showed you with the bat story the first time, and then the second time I would do one of the many variations I already gave you. Later today, I'm doing a story from start to finish, and I'll have even more variations in there. So if you want to know more about different things you can do with the stories, I recommend that session or watching the recording later. But you can also print the stories for students so they can read along, they can take them home. We really want you to have as much like robust information for the students as possible. You'll notice the pictures. We really try to include things that you could talk about in the pictures here too. Like you'll see the Colombian flag, so you could talk about the flag. You'll see these musicians, you could talk a little bit about the music in Colombia. Lots to talk about both in the story itself and in the images. And then this one, Lydia is from Michigan, like me, and she is going to visit her grandparents in Colombia. And she has her pet, and she's showing her cousins her pet, and she talks about her pet's name, and her cousins are all excited. You could ask students what they would name the chameleon. That's why we did so much chameleon heavy work in the Empezamos activities. You could ask students if they have a chameleon or want a chameleon or what pets they have. So there's all sorts of conversation you could have with your students based around her pet. You'll notice the images here. While they were really cute in Primaria 1, here we tried to make them more like a comic book so that, that's what's popular with the older students, as I'm sure you know. Now, during dinner, something horrible happens and her chameleon gets lost. Chameleon, or she's very, very sad. And then her cousins have to help her find the chameleon. And I'm going to just zoom in on this picture because you'll see all throughout the picture, there's lots of like chameleons hidden. So you could have your students look around and try to find how many chameleons are in the picture. You could count them, you could talk about them. Her parents or her grandparents have a coffee field, so that's where they are. You could also talk about coffee in Colombia. So again, lots and lots to talk about. I don't mean to spoil the story for you, but Lydia does indeed find her chameleon, and it has a happy ending. Most of the stories in elementary have happy endings. So this is a great story. Lots you can do with it. I'm not going to go over all the things because we kind of did with the Primaria 1. But again, if you want more ideas for things to do with the story, come and join me at 1 o'clock. In Primaria 1 and Primaria 2, though I didn't show you the Primaria 1, we have something called Veamos. This is the story, but it's done as like I grew up in the 80s, and when I grew up, I remembered like those they were almost like animated stories where the camera would it would be a story, but the camera would focus on different parts of the picture and there'd be sound effects. So that's what this is. This is almost like a little animated story with sound effects. You could do an entire class with it and have students actually watch it, and you could have them act out different parts of the story or draw pictures or do the total physical response to go along with the story. Or what I sometimes do with these is I will play these as the students are coming into the room. And what happens is they go from talking in the hall to like watching the story as soon as they come in. And then the students who come in near the end of class will be like, hey, or near the end of the passing period will be like, hey, I missed the cartoon. And they'll ask you to play it again, and then you'll have to play it again, and then everyone will get twice the exposure to the native speaker audio and to the high frequency vocabulary. So it's kind of a win-win for teachers. Again, you have the multiple choice. You could just have students do it, but I always like to do it as a class first. Here you could have students, so it says Lydia has a pet, baby, or dog. You could have students come up and choose on the board. Sometimes I'll say, if you think the answer is pet, go here. If you think it's baby, go here. If you think it's dog, go here. And have students get up and move around the room. Or you could even have them have whiteboards, write the answer down on the whiteboards and hold it up. You could even put them on teams for points. No teacher prep there, just pass out the whiteboards and give them points for correct answers. And it makes it more like a game, and then students can go and do it on their own, and it's twice the reading, twice the amount of repetitions they're getting, and again, very low teacher prep. That's a theme of mine generally. This is matching the characters to the description. You could do this any of the 3 ways I just suggested as well. And then this drawing activity, it says, what are the chameleons of Colombia like? Create a special family of Colombian chameleons. So this could be really fun. You could, again, take these chameleons, put them into a game where students hunt around the room for the different chameleons. You could put them into a free voluntary reading book. where students could read them, especially if your students are capable of starting to write on the pictures. Like they could write some information about the chameleons. They could write their names or what color they are or what they like, just depending upon where they are in their language learning journey. Or you could even hang these up in the hall. When I hang up this kind of student work, students always slow down to kind of check it out, and then they're getting extra Spanish, which is what we want, as much language fun as possible. And again, they can submit a photo of their drawing. In Primaria 1 and 2, we also have videos for students to watch. The Primaria 1 videos are Pocoyo, which are gold. I could do an entire session on just the Pocoyo because Pocoyo videos are great. And also we have the Pablo y el Profe, which are videos that are made with like little animated characters and they are specifically for the units in Primaria 1. Those are pretty fun and a little bit silly. In Primaria 2, we have Jessie Feliz videos. And Jessie Feliz is a Spanish teacher that has like circumstantial videos all over the place. Like in this one, she's going to a wedding to go with the chapter vocabulary and themes. And it's a great way for students to get some listening practice with everything they've heard in the chapter. These videos are short and they also come with pop-up video activities. So after you watch the video and talk about it, you can watch it again and questions will pop up that students can answer. One of my favorite things about these pop-up videos is if they get the answer wrong, they can click a button to replay the section and they can hear it a second time. And a lot of the times once they've read the thing they're looking for and then they hear it a second time, they'll be like, oh, I hear it now. And so it's great listening practice for them embedded right within. You'll also see, so that's Nuestra Amiga Jessie Feliz. You'll also see all these interview videos. We have interview videos with students from around the Spanish speaking world. We tried to make them really fun questions like, do you have a pet? And what do you like to do with your family? You get to talk about not only the content of the video, but what is in the video, like what's behind him. Oh, he has a Rubik's Cube. Do you have a Rubik's Cube? He likes Adidas. Do you like Adidas? So you can talk about all the things in the video as well as the content. And these also all have the pop-up video questions. And then students can also answer these questions on their own. So these interview videos are a great way for students to start to connect their language to actual people from around the world. And then, this is another favorite. We also have, these are leveled articles. So these leveled articles are about some um, topic that goes with the chapter themes. There's a version A, B, and C. Version A is pretty basic. Version B has a little bit more of the story, and version C has the entire story. And you can do these one of two ways. I like to do them where we just do version A, and we read it together as a class, and we make sure everyone understands. So one way I would do this is I would read it in Spanish. A Lidia le gustan los animales. And then I would go back and point at it, and my students would say the English. Lydia likes the animals. Then I would say, in Colombia, Lydia va a la selva. And I would probably hover over that so they could see selva means jungle. And then I would point at the words, and the students would all together say, in Colombia, Lydia goes to the jungle. And I would probably do the version A that way to make sure everyone is on the same page. And then we would go to version B, which is a little bit more information. And then we would go to version C, which is the entire story. But if you start slowly with version A, it builds up confidence. And if they don't see version, like if we just went to version C, that's a lot of writing in Spanish, and a lot of the times students will feel overwhelmed. But if you reveal it bit by going A, B, and C, then students feel a lot more confident. Underneath each section of these leveled articles, there are questions that go with each leveled article, and they get more advanced as you go, so it really scaffolds to the students. One other way to use these level articles that I've done very successfully is to print them and cut them out. So version A is on one page, version B is on another page, version C is on the third page, and then let students self-scaffold. Say, we're going to read all of us something about the same topic, and you pick which version feels just right for you, A, B, or C. And it's really interesting to see how students choose. A lot of the times they'll just choose based on what seems just right for their reading level, which is a great way for them to choose. But sometimes I will find my slower processors will choose the full article because they're so excited about the topic. So it's really exciting when you see students who are normally like reluctant readers be like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to read about this crocodile or whatever the story's about. I want to read the whole thing. So both of those are great ways to use these leveled articles to have everyone reading the same page, but meeting each student right where they're at. There's version B and C. We also have a section in Primaria 1 and 2 called the World in Photos, and there are a couple of photos with little captions that tell a little bit about whatever the topic is. Here we say it's Loteria and a happy birthday, but then we also have a panorama. These are beautiful. This is one of El Mercado, the market in Mexico City. Now this is just a screenshot, but if we were actually in a platform, you could move around, you could zoom in and zoom out, you could kind of walk on the street a little bit. You can talk about all the things in here, but these are also great for playing I Spy, Veo Veo. It's a great way to end the class because students can play a game and talk about colors and practice vocabulary all at once, and there's very low teacher prep. I also recommend, comparing what you see in the picture to something close to where you live. So you could do like an outdoor market or a farmer's market here and say what you see that's the same, what you see that's different, and have that whole discussion. So there's lots of opportunities for different things you can do with these pictures. We also have an appendix. The appendix is fabulous because it has things like ABCs and the numbers and coloring pages. We don't give you a specific coloring page activity for every single story, but there are coloring pages for any single story. So you could take one of those activities and apply it to a different story, or you could just do a coloring page because sometimes you just need to let students color. That's all in there for you, as well as a student survey that students can kind of let you know how they felt about class for the year, weather and calendar, all of that great stuff is in there. And then each unit, I didn't cover this very, very quickly. Each unit also has a long story. What you were seeing were the small stories that incorporates all of the vocabulary and a test in it, as well as a can do. There's a pre-assessment you can do at the start of a program and a post-assessment you can do at the end of a chapter. That is a great way to show student progress, both for parents, for students, and for administration. And those are kind of integrated within the unit. And then, last but not least, because we're getting close to time, there are also entire novels embedded into Primaria 1 and Primaria 2. In Primaria 1, it's Nico Nieke, which is about this adorable Nieke from Panama. So the students get to learn about this Nieke. It's a fun story with lots of actions the students can do throughout that you can really see, like Nico looks up, he looks down, he looks around. So there's lots of activities you can have students do with this, but there's also some cross curricular science connections you can do with this one. And it's just a fun, animal one to learn about other animals because the little students love that. And then Primaria Dos, El Pelo Incontrolable is about a girl learning to appreciate and love her curly hair. Amazing pictures and such like a touching story. The author has her own connection to this with her mother and her mom's hair and where she grew up. So I highly recommend when you do this story, you read all about Grace's family, which she includes in the introduction as well. This is a fabulous story. Last but not least, because we're getting really close, under the teachers panel, under additional resources, we have all sorts of things you can do. We have a scope and sequence, which tells you what's in every chapter. We have a pacing guide, so if you're not sure how to use all of the resources, it will tell you this is what a possible day 1 would look like, day 2 and day 3 if you teach for X amount of minutes. So that pacing guide is really helpful. We have comic strips. If you come to a story from start to finish, I'll talk about ways I use comic strips there, graphic organizers, KWL charts, and we also have really fabulous substitute teacher plans I just created over the summer. And these are meant to be able to, like, you print them, you plug in a couple of things, and then you can leave them as a substitute teacher. Because I know that one of the worst things for me as a teacher is when I wake up and I feel terrible and I really don't want to go in, but I've got to sit there and spend 3 hours writing sub plans. So these sub plans are meant to make your life really easy, and they're there and they're free for everyone, whether you're a Voces subscriber or not. As our gift to you, they can go with any story or any reading whether your sub speaks your language or not. We just tried to make your life a little easier with those. That's what the scope and sequence looks like. This is kind of part of the pacing guide, but I'm not going to get into that because we don't have enough time. Last but not least, and then I'll save the last few minutes for questions, we have an amazing resource called the Hub. If you're a Voces subscriber, you already have access. You just need to add the title. If you are not a Voces subscriber, you can get the Hub for free. Within the Hub, we have everything we could think of to support you as a teacher. There's the science behind acquisition driven instruction. There's a bunch of ways you can do total physical response and some training in there, personalized questions and answers. Here's stories. And then there's like 10 different activities you could do with any story. And then we also have one for pictures, and then there's 10 different activities you could do with any pictures. So there's all sorts of ways that you can extend your teaching and support within the hub, and we hope that it supports you too. And I actually think this is probably now out of date. So that is it. I went through a lot very quickly. This is my email. If you have specific elementary questions for me or specific Voces questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. ericapb@vocesdigital.com. Info@vocesdigital.com just gets you any information that goes right to our customer service. And I am here for questions now with our last 4 minutes. Ooh, so Vanessa says, I am teaching seventh graders for the first time. What book do you recommend that I start with? Primaria 2 or Puente? I would try Puente to start, only because seventh graders, I feel like they're at that age where they want to be the big kids, understandably. I would start with Puente, and then if it seems like it's too far, too advanced for your students, go back to Primaria and maybe integrate some things from Puente. So I would start with Puente just because it's made for middle school students and it has topics and stories that I think they will really enjoy. But if you try it and you're like, man, this is just way too much for them, circle back to Primaria Dos. Once you have access to one Spanish title, you have access to all. So there's nothing like wrong with starting with this and be like, oh, it's too high for my students. I'm going to go a little bit lower because you have access to both. So that's how I would play that one. Any other questions? I talked a lot, so I hope I didn't talk over anyone's questions.
No, the only one I see is that seventh grader question, the Primaria or Puente. So I think that's all I see there in the chat.
Great. Well, I hope this was super helpful for you, and maybe I will see you later today at A Story from Start to Finish.